American evangelicalism and Western Christianity writ large have done a huge disservice to Christianity and the concept of Jesus, broadly speaking. This morning, I'm speaking not only as an external observer of our socio-religio-political landscape, but as one who came to faith in it. It has been both my experience and my observation that much of American evangelicalism and Western Christianity conceives of the life of the disciple of Christ that is both comfortable, easy, and aligned to traditionalist conceptions promoted within society. The Jesus peddled therein reflects American evangelicalism and its ideologies rather than the Jesus, the gospel, and the epistle authors took pains to paint for us. I remember specifically that my faith in and obedience to Jesus was going to make my life easier. That I would find myself in states of existential comfort and bliss. I'd be ushered into the spiritual realm, no longer afraid of where I'd end up in death, while intentionally remaining indifferent or ignorant toward the issues of the world, because why worry when Jesus is just going to come back and make it all better? Yay. Faith was to make me perpetually happy, super nice, and too blessed to be stressed. My only two obligations were evangelism and obedience. I was to be a good Christian, which meant telling people about Jesus and how great he made my life, and obeying my authorities in all things, which was God's will. You might be burning in hell temporally or heading towards it spiritually. And that was none of my business, really, because that was all your choice. My sins were forgiven, and that's all that really mattered. That was the goal of the gospel and of Jesus' mission in the world. I was just lucky or blessed, I guess, enough to have decided to find Christ when I did. But none of that was true. I actually wanted to go into ministry based off of all of that. And going into ministry revealed that I learned a lot about how none of that was true. Like a sports car sold to someone suffering from the malaise and banality of midlife, I was sold a saccharine Jesus, having little power and agency in the world because he was so conformed to it, or embedded or buried in it, in the ideas of yesteryear. Becoming Christian was going to solve all my problems. That's literally what I was told. Become Christian and all your life is just going to get better. Turns out, becoming Christian created more problems than it solved. Here's why. And this is where Luke comes to help us. Luke tells us that Jesus addressed the many crowds that were coming together around him. These many crowds were composed of neutral people who may become disciples, and not just his disciples. So imagine Jesus traveling with his disciples, and then there's many crowds, which means what? There's like many groups kind of following along. So finally, he's like walking with his turns to address everyone, okay? So immediately Luke is highlighting that the audience here is everyone. So you might as well just go ahead and paint your little stick figure right into that group because you've been grafted into it, according to Luke. Then Luke tells us that Jesus turned and said to them, which I think with what about to come out of his mouth would have caught a lot of people off guard, like, that's not a good way to introduce what you're about to say. Anyway, he says, if someone comes to me and hates not their father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yet even their own soul, they are not able to be my disciple. Okay, then. What does that mean? Luke's emphasis here is implied. Those following Jesus must know the cost of following. This isn't just a casual stroll behind a dude who says some really cool and weird things. Okay? The cost of discipleship, which in my manuscript is in quotes because I want you to think immediately Dietrich Bonhoeffer. How many of you did? Good job. Chris, I know you have my back. Okay, the cost of discipleship is not only the burden of the disciples, it's the burden of someone's coming to Jesus. There is no way around the reality. To follow Jesus is to also participate in the mission of God in the world, as Jesus does. Obedience to God by faith and following Jesus necessarily means that they will be confronted with performing intentional acts of disobedience within their private realms. In other words, it ain't easy being Christian, which immediately you all thought it ain't easy being. Thank you. Because I thought it too when I was writing it. Not even family ties, a vital component of ancient Palestinian life, can get in the way. The follower of Christ might not even let family loyalty hinder them from pursuing God and God's mission in the world. This is what the hate means in this verse. It is not about having ill will or malevolence toward such people, but to actually have such an attitude and posture towards them that when push came to shove, you walked. It's a hands off. Not even loyalty to one's life or livelihood can get in the way of following Christ and being as Christ in the world. Again, the recall to Dietrich Bonhoeffer would be really good right now. Okay? But I can teach on him later. Luke then tells us that Jesus said, "Whoever does not carry the cross and come after me, that one is not able to be my disciple." While we may think of this statement through the lens of Good Friday, it isn't actually about that. Okay? Remember, for Jesus, Good Friday hasn't happened yet. All right? It's an equivalent thought to hating the family and oneself and broadens the scope of disobedience. It won't be just private, it will be public and against the established authorities, ecclesiastical and political, who have power to punish you and take your life because of your disobedience. Because that's what the cross was, right? It was a form of political punishment, torture, death. It was corporal punishment. Okay? So what Jesus is doing is pushing that whole idea that not only are you going to have tension in your private life, okay, in your immediate circle, but you're going to draw the heat from the political authorities as well as you pursue me, which is pursuing God and God's mission in the world. In other words, the whole life of the follower of Christ will be exposed to the potential ramifications of following this man who is God. Everything is up for grabs, Jesus is saying. Luke then tells us that Jesus provides a moment of reflection for those listening. For who of you, willing to build a tower, does not at all, after sitting down, estimate the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? So that, lest while he has laid his foundation and is not having the power to finish, all those who gaze at it will begin to mock him, saying, "This person began to build and had not the power to finish." You got to get that mocking tone in there. Okay? Imagine, because remember, Jesus was mocked on the cross, right? It's got that kind of like, "Oh, you think you're so great, why don't you come down and save yourself? You're not so great now, are you? Oh, you're not as rich as you thought you were." Okay? Or what king going to come together in war against another king will not at all, after sitting down, deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 troops to encounter the one who comes against him with 20,000? Now, if he cannot, while the other is still far off, he sends a delegation asking for the terms of peace. Oh, I'm going to lose big in this one. So stop. You know that game with the group that you're supposed to like move across the screen and it multiplies according to whatever number? You ever seen those ads? No, just me and Liza? Okay, I imagine that's what goes in my head. Like you have to like plan your course so that you're multiplying so that, because you can see the next army that you're either going to be devoured by or you're going to devour, and you want to make sure you have more troops, right? So you have to shift over to the times 10 and skip the times 2 because you only have 20 people. And that next group has, you know this, right? Yeah. I get mesmerized by it. I'm like, oh yeah. I watch whoever's like running the game like as the ad. I'm always like, good choice, yeah, go. Anyway, but that's the idea. You want to sit down and determine, do I have the resources to fight this king who is clearly bigger and stronger than I am? And no, I don't. So I'm going to run fast, Philip, and tell them not to come. Okay, right? Right. You all agree with this. Okay, the follower of Christ is not headed towards some sort of comfortable and pleasant and easy life, Jesus is saying. They must think about the cost, likely conflict and confrontation, and what the end will look like. It's not going to be easy. In fact, it will be hard, and hard may be the lightest way to say it. Notice that Jesus says that a king who only has 10,000 troops needs to determine if he can fight a king that has 20,000 troops, meaning if you kind of do the kind of narrative math there, the disciple is the one with the inferior number of troops. It's not going to be easy. You're going to be in the minority. Okay? For those who follow Jesus, according to Luke, they will feel the anguish of the decision deep in their bones as their choice begins at times to feel unbearable, lonely, and profoundly demanding in terms of foregoing material glory and honor and forsaking the creature comforts of fitting in and following along, including family and friends. Okay? According to Luke and Luke's Jesus, the Christian will be the one who stands out, and not because they are so righteous, but because they are so hated by the kingdom of humanity. Authentic discipleship will force the follower of Christ into a spotlight and will paint a target on their back, not because of their obedience to traditionalist conceptions of society and religion, but specifically because of their disobedience born from their new life in Christ, marked by new ways of being in the world that grate against the status quo. Big difference. Participating in God's mission of the divine revolution of love, life, and liberation will do that. Never forget that Good Friday was more than a spiritual event. Okay? Therefore, Luke tells us that Jesus concluded this discourse with, therefore, in this way, all of you who do not take leave of all the things that are at hand are not able to be my disciple. I prefer my translation to the one that we read in the book. Okay? Because it sounds like Jesus wants you to be poor, sell all your possessions. But that's not what actually Jesus is trying to say here. This is not what Luke's trying to communicate. Luke is asking you to remove your vice-like grip on your things and your relationships and hold on loosely, because those could be very well temporary and fleeting once you get going on this journey. This last bit isn't a new command to sell things, but rather to loosen one's grip on all that they have. The disciple of Christ, the follower of the way, the participant in God's mission and divine revolution in the world cannot have loyalties placed anywhere else. Their only allegiance is to the reign of God, forfeiting their status and position in the kingdom of humanity. Everything needs to be let go of. For the disciple of Christ, this is not about being intentionally poor, friendless, and rejecting one's family. Rather, it's about holding on loose enough that when conformity to the status quo of the kingdom of humanity is demanded publicly or privately, the disciple of Christ can let go, proceed on the way of the reign of God, to the glory of God, and for the well-being of the neighbor. So, you're probably feeling really uplifted right now. Well, if you are, you're not supposed to be. The Christian life is hard, okay? This has been the consistent theme of Luke's presentation of Jesus these many weeks. Literally keep opening up the gospel, and I literally keep going, not that passage, because I really want to bring you good news. And Jesus, and what Luke is doing with Jesus, that's not in the cards. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It's not the surefire way to be successful, popular, or famous. That's the prosperity gospel, and it's a huge, massive lie. It will not allow you always to be nice to others, tolerant, always fun to be around, or always good vibes only. It will not be the foolproof way toward material blessings in this world or to acquiring favor of the rich and powerful. To follow Christ means to be intractable when it comes to the kingdom of humanity's tendency toward only rejecting violently and violently attacking God's reign in the world. Christians, according to Luke's Jesus, cannot side with nation over Christ, cannot side with the status quo over the laboring of God to bear something new into the world. Stress on new, not a retreat to something old. Cannot participate in the captivity of our neighbors over fighting for their liberation. Cannot become familiar with indifference over feeling the risk and demand of love, and cannot advocate for death over life. Those ways have all been cut off. The Christian, the one who follows and is to be as Christ in the world, is the one who finds themselves at the intersection and the epicenter of the temporal and spiritual realms, with the will conformed to God's will, hands and feet ready to bring God glory by bringing well-being to their neighbor, and an eye keen on spotting and a voice ready to call out the violence and destruction of the kingdom of humanity. It's not about self-righteous, holier than thou, clean and pure, self-imposed glory and boasting. It's about the radical love of God that is the revolutionary love of neighbor. And while I want to comfort you by reminding you that God is with you, for surely God is with you. I can't solely tell you that in good faith and with a good conscience, because the Christian walk is hard. And I must tell you that. It will make you angry. It will make you feel the pain of the world. It will make you cry. It will make you want to turn over and pull the comforters back over yourself and not get up in the morning, because you are daring to love in a world that would rather have you indifferent, that you care about the living souls that are being punished for the color of their skin or their identity and their sexuality and the people who they want to love. You will feel that. But I can also tell you there's no other way to live, because I don't want to be shut down. To feel that pain, to know that risk, to understand and to be humble. It hurts. It's hard. But it's the only way Christians get to do it. The world would have me soothe you to sleep or back to sleep, telling you sweet nothings that let you off the hook. But it's my job to participate in the prophetic calling of God to wake you up. Luke's Jesus doesn't want sleepers, but those who can stay awake, call out the discrepancies between what is and what could be, and who dare to step disobediently into the void to protect love, life, and liberation of the neighbor from the aggressive overreach of authority, ecclesiastically and politically. Beloved, this is what it looks like to follow God. Consider wisely the cost of such discipleship.